Russia, a land of extremes, a land of contrasts, a country that carries within its vast territory more than just cold cities and imperial palaces. Russia is a journey through time, an immersion into landscapes that seem to emerge from dreams, legends, and forgotten battles. You might think you've seen all the world has to offer, but perhaps you haven't yet glimpsed what lies hidden beneath the mist of the Caucasus Mountains, in the silent forests of Siberia, or within the stone walls forgotten by time. In this video, you'll discover Russia's most surprising and captivating secrets, places where nature and history intertwine in unique ways, locations where every stone holds a memory and every lake reflects centuries of spirituality. Get ready for a journey through abandoned castles, mystical villages, surreal geological formations, and religious sanctuaries suspended in time. In the heart of the Caucasus, where clouds seem to touch the earth, exists a village so ancient and harmonious it appears to have sprouted from the mountain itself. Kau, one of Russia's oldest settlements. Built with local stones, its houses blend into the rocky terrain as if they were a natural extension of the landscape. Viewed from afar, it looks like a mirage sculpted by time. Kau was a strategic point on the ancient Silk Road, welcoming merchants, pilgrims, and warriors throughout the centuries. But what truly stands out are the agricultural terraces surrounding it. Built over 2,000 years ago, carved into the steep slopes, they aren't just testaments to ancestral engineering, but symbols of resilience. To this day, they sustain cultivation in one of Russia's most challenging regions. Not far away, amid the mountains of Dagestan, lies the impressive and silent Gamul, known as Russia's Machu Picchu. Abandoned since 2015, this ancestral village, with up to 5,000 years of history, preserves in its ruins the echoes of entire generations. Its structures, made of stacked stone and packed earth, have withstood centuries of harsh weather, wars, and isolation. What's most impressive about Gamul isn't just its architecture, but the sense of eternity that hangs over the place. It's as if time had been frozen, preserving a fragment of a forgotten civilization hidden from the eyes of the modern world. Moving north, on the islands of Lake Ladoga, stands the Fortress of Orek, a medieval structure erected in 1323 to mark a peace treaty between the Principality of Novgorod and the Kingdom of Sweden. Orech, meaning nut in Russian, earned its name for being considered a tough nut to crack, and it lived up to its reputation. During World War II, it bravely resisted the Nazi siege while protecting Leningrad from total destruction. Its walls, firm and unshakable, are scars of resistance and honor. Today, the fortress is a silent monument to the resilience of people who refuse to surrender. In the icy north, on the vast Lake Onega, is one of Russia's most spectacular islands, Kizhi, an open-air museum that seems to have emerged from a fable. Its churches, houses, and chapels, all made entirely of wood, represent centuries of architectural tradition. The most impressive is the Church of the Transfiguration, with its 22 wooden domes built without a single nail, just joinery techniques and faith. Surrounded by log fences and multifunctional barns, Kizhi is a faithful portrait of peasant life in northern Russia. In Kizhi, architecture and spirituality walk hand in hand, and wood resonates as a living testimony to devotion and ingenuity. In the Republic of Karelia, almost at the border with Finland, lies Ruskiela Mountain Park, a former marble quarry transformed into a natural refuge. What was once an industrial site is now a canyon filled with crystal-clear waters and dramatic cliffs. For centuries, marble from here was used in the construction of palaces in St. Petersburg. Today, the park is a tribute to reconciliation between nature and humanity. Trails cut through the woods, small boats glide over turquoise lagoons, and History echoes in every stone reflected in the mirror of water. Heading up to the Ural Mountains region, we encounter a supernatural sight, the Seven Giants of Manpupuner, rock formations that rise between 98 and 138 feet tall, isolated on a deserted plain. According to local legend, these stone pillars were once giant shamans transformed into rock after challenging the mountain spirits. Scientifically, they're the result of millions of years of selective erosion, which makes their appearance even more impressive. Standing before them is like facing ancestral sentinels from a time that no longer exists. Near the Caspian Sea rests a citadel of millennial importance, the fortress of Narankala. Built during the Persian Empire, it was the stage for conflicts, invasions, and legends. One speaks of a golden throne buried in the underground chambers of the fortress, capable of granting absolute power to whoever finds it. The stone structure still watches over the coastal city like a ghost from the past. Even in ruins, its silhouette against the turquoise sky continues to inspire stories about lost kings, betrayals, and eternal ambitions. Atop the mountains of Dagestan stands Gunib, a village that carries the weight of history in every rock. It was there that, in 1859, Imam Shamil, the legendary leader of the Caucasian resistance against the Russian Empire, made his last and courageous stand before surrendering. The landscape surrounding the Gunib fortress is one of austere and melancholic beauty. The stones still hold the echoes of war drums, Muslim prayers, and the silence of a people who fought to the end to preserve their land. Still in Dagestan, one of Russia's most spectacular waterfalls descends with fury, Tobat. Nearly 230 feet high, its waters plunge into a narrow, deep canyon, creating a vision that seems to come from a mythological painting. During the spring thaw, Tobat reaches its peak with a powerful flow that shakes the valley and echoes for miles. The surrounding region is marked by unique rock formations, hidden valleys, and trails that wind through the mountainous immensity. On the banks of the Volkhov River lies the fortress of Staraya Ladoga, one of the most symbolic places of the Russian state's foundation. Originally built of wood and later of stone in the 12th century, this citadel is identified as the possible site where the legendary Rurik, founder of the Rurik dynasty, was invited to rule, surrounded by walls and with a bucolic landscape. Around it, Staraya Ladoga isn't just a strategic point. It's a capsule of Russia's birth. Its towers still look to the horizon, as if waiting for the return of the first Varangians who once landed there. Among the dramatic landscapes of Dagestan is the Sulak Canyon, the deepest in Europe, about 6,300 feet deep, deeper than the Grand Canyon itself. Carved by the Sulak River over millennia, the gorge impresses with its intensity of colors and dizzying verticality. The turquoise-blue water that cuts through the valley reflects the clear sky and sacred mountains. According to local tradition, the river carries not just water, but ancestral spirits that protect the valley and have inspired legends for generations. In the heart of the Mari El Republic, we find Yoshkar Ola, a city that seems like an architectural dream, with buildings that combine traditional Russian style with European influences. The name means Red City, or Beautiful City in the local Mari language. The colorful constructions and urban setting evoke both fairy tales and ancient kingdoms. The Annunciation Cathedral and the modern Yoshkar Ola Kremlin are two impressive landmarks, revealing how local culture intertwines with Orthodox Christianity and regional identity. Along the Lena River, in the heart of Siberia, rises one of the most impressive landscapes on the planet, the Lena Pillars. These gigantic rock formations, hundreds of feet high, line the riverbank like stone sentinels. Formed over 500 million years ago, they emerged during the Cambrian period, when life on Earth was still taking its first steps. Considered a natural heritage of humanity, the Lena Pillars represent not only a geological landmark, but also a spiritual one. The indigenous peoples of the region see them as nature spirits solidified for eternity. Near the border with Finland, Viborg is a jewel of multicultural heritage. Founded by the Swedes in 1293, the city has belonged to Sweden, Finland, and Russia, and the voices of these different civilizations echo in its streets. In the historic center stands the imposing Viborg Castle, with its medieval white stone tower. The city mixes Gothic, Nordic, and Slavic architecture in a unique urban landscape. It's like leafing through a history book while walking between walls and cobblestone alleys. In the far north of Lake Ladoga, Europe's largest freshwater lake, we find Valam Island, home to one of Russia's most important or Orthodox monasteries. The Transfiguration Monastery, with its blue and white domes, is a spiritual beacon amid the silence of the icy waters. The island is also surrounded by small hermitages and chapels that welcome monks, pilgrims, and seekers of silence. Valam is more than a religious site. It's a meeting point between faith, nature, and retreat. At the foot of the Caucasus Mountains lies Dargovs, one of Russia's most mysterious places. Known as the City of the Dead, this village houses nearly 100 stone crypts built between the 14th and 18th centuries, many with pointed roofs that mimic houses. According to legend, during an epidemic, the infected voluntarily isolated themselves inside the crypts to prevent the spread of the disease. The personal items buried with the dead suggest a strong sense of spirituality and preparation for the afterlife. The Ingushetia region, one of Russia's smallest republics, harbors one of the greatest treasures of Caucasian architecture, the ancient Ingush stone towers. These medieval structures, built between the 9th and 13th centuries, served as defense and also as symbols of clans and families. Although many are in ruins, some have been restored with support from the local population. The towers stand alone, in forgotten valleys, like monuments that defy time and tell stories of honor, war, and resistance. In southern Siberia, hidden among dense mountains, Lake Telitskoye shines like a liquid jewel. Considered one of the cleanest lakes in the world, its water comes directly from the thaw of the Altai Mountains and the glacial rivers around it. Called Altan Köl, Golden Lake, by local peoples, it's surrounded by untouched forests, sacred caves, and trails where shamanism is still practiced. Each morning, mist that rests on its waters seems to tell ancestral secrets. Among the most enigmatic corners of Altai is the Blue Geyser Lake. Small in size, but gigantic in visual magnetism, it displays a hypnotizing natural phenomenon. The bottom of the lake is marked by circular patterns in shades of blue and green, formed by the constant movement of underground water. The lake has no visible tributaries. Its supply comes from underground springs, which makes it even more mysterious. The patterns never repeat, like a living work of art in constant mutation. Founded by Peter the Great on the banks of the Neva River, St. Petersburg is a poem written in stone, glass, and gold. With its wide avenues, canals, and monumental architecture, the city exudes imperial history. Among its main landmarks is the Peter and Paul Fortress, the cradle of the city and symbol of resistance. Near it rises the majestic St. Isaac's Cathedral, whose golden dome dominates the urban horizon. But perhaps nothing symbolizes the soul of St. Petersburg as much as the Hermitage, one of the world's largest museums. Its galleries traverse centuries of art and culture, and its walls have housed empresses and revolutions. Still in St. Petersburg, one of the most striking constructions is the Church of the Savior on spilled blood, erected on the exact spot where Tsar Alexander II was assassinated. With its traditional Russian architecture and colorful onion-shaped domes, the church is an explosion of symbolism and reverence. Each mosaic inside was designed to honor not just the Tsar, but the memory of the empire and the Orthodox faith. It's one of the few churches in Russia built entirely with public donations, a testimony to the national commotion caused by the attack. In the outskirts of the former imperial capital, we find the dazzling Peterhof Palace, Peter the Great's masterpiece. Inspired by Versailles, the complex combines perfectly symmetrical gardens, golden fountains, and halls decorated with marble and mirrors. Known as the Jewel by the Sea, Peterhof was designed to represent the glory of the Russian Empire. The fountains, fed by gravity rather than pumps, continue to function the same way since the 18th century, a marvel of engineering and aesthetics. On the coast of Crimea, on the edge of a cliff, rests one of the country's most photogenic castles, the Swallow's Nest. Built in neo-Gothic style in the early 20th century, it seems to defy gravity, balancing on rocks at the edge of the Black Sea. Even with its modern origin, the castle has become a symbol of Russian romanticism, and its appearance recalls medieval tales. After surviving earthquakes and revolutions, today it functions as a museum and viewpoint, offering one of the most spectacular views of the Russian coast. In the central west of the country is Kazan, the capital of the Republic of Tatarstan, where Orthodox cathedrals coexist with Muslim minarets. In the heart of the city, the Kazan Kremlin houses the impressive Kul Sharif Mosque, one of the largest in Europe. This coexistence between Islamic and Orthodox Christian faith is visible in the architecture, streets, and local culture. Kazan symbolizes the plurality of Russian identity, a country that extends across 2 continents and numerous traditions. Further east in Siberia, we find Lake Baikal, the deepest and oldest freshwater lake in the world. More than 5,250 feet deep and formed about 25 million years ago, it holds about 20% of all the unfrozen freshwater on the planet. But Baikal is more than numbers. It's sacred. For local indigenous peoples, such as the Buryats, the lake is a living entity. Its mirrored waters hide legends of submerged gods and guardian spirits. On Olkhon Island, Shaman Rock is the most revered. Energy Point, a portal between worlds, according to the elders. In the Russian Far East, the Kamchatka Peninsula looks like another planet. Active volcanoes, geysers, boiling rivers, and glaciers share space with bears, eagles, and whales. Among the most well-known is the Klyuchevskaya Sopka volcano, the highest in Eurasia. Kamchatka is called the Land of Fire and Ice for a reason. Nature here is wild, untouched, and magical. The Three Brothers rock formations near the coast are the subject of local legends about giants who protected the bay from a tsunami. Isolated between Poland and Lithuania, Kaliningrad is a fragment of the Prussian past that is now part of the Russian Federation. The former Königsberg carries the memory of philosophers like Kant, who is buried next to the city's Gothic cathedral. The Amber Museum, inside a former military tower, preserves the legacy of Baltic gold, one of the region's main natural riches. Kaliningrad is a time capsule that mixes European Gothic, Soviet brutalism, and modern Russian identity. No tour of Russia would be complete without Moscow, the beating heart of the nation. The city evolved from a wooden village to a global metropolis that houses icons such as the Kremlin, St. Basil's Cathedral, and the imposing Cathedral of Christ the Savior. The Kremlin, with its red walls and golden domes, has been the epicenter of Russian power for centuries. Red Square, which has witnessed empires, revolutions, and military parades, continues to be the symbolic stage of the country's history. From medieval Kremlins to imperial palaces, from wooden peasant villages to golden mosques, from active volcanoes to abyssal canyons, Russia houses a variety of wonders that few countries can match. Its territory covers 11 time zones, and with them come 11 distinct worlds, with myths, flavors, languages, and landscapes that defy any simple definition of nationality. Traveling through Russia is more than crossing borders. It's traversing time. Every corner of the country carries a story, a battle, a miracle, or a tragedy. It's a territory where nature imposes itself with a brutal and silent force, and where humans have left marks that resist the centuries. If Russia's soul could be summarized, it would be hidden in its stone towers, in its sacred lakes, in its smoking volcanoes, and in its forgotten temples. This is Russia, a country that defies expectations, a country that, like a stone fortress, only reveals its true beauty to those who dare to enter.